Hey guys, and welcome to Fireside Chat with the Johnstons. I'm Danielle, and I will be your host today. So guys, first of all, I just want to tell you, thank you for listening. We are so excited. I say we, Justin's not on here with me today. He will be on some of the upcoming episodes, but
the show must go on.
The busier you get in your gyms, sometimes the less your schedules align. So we are super excited. We heard our listeners and downloads have been just blowing up lately, and we're super excited to be, getting new listeners. So thanks for joining us, guys. So if this is your first time listening to Fireside Chat podcast, let me just give you a quick down and dirty about who we are and why we host this podcast on a weekly basis. So first off, my name is Danielle Johnston. I'm one of the owners of Next Generation Gym Owners, which is an all-star business consulting company. That basically means we help gym owners create profitable gyms that they can actually enjoy so that you can, don't we all have this dream of being a gym owner and setting our own schedule and having thriving all-star programs? And so we help you guys get there. On top of that, for the last 13 years, I've owned Twister Sports in Warrensburg, Missouri, teeny tiny town right in the middle of Missouri. And we offer competitive tumbling, competitive cheer, competitive dance, recreational classes, gymnastics, batting cages, birthday parties, licensed childcare for before and after school care and summer camps, all the things. So if you guys are hearing in my voice right now, I had the flu pretty bad last week. And so it really took a toll on a lot of the, at least what I felt, a lot of the momentum that I was making in my gym. The great part about this is that for so long, we've told you guys the importance of delegation. And though I was sick with the flu, I was really excited to see everything kind of continue to go off without any issues in my absence, because I'm telling you guys, I was down in bed. I watched a whole bunch of TV episodes. I don't know if I remember anything, but I was just in and out falling asleep with them because I was pretty sick. So this is typically the time of the year that I'm spending all my effort focused on finishing this season strong, making sure our teams look good for our end of season events and for our final competitions, giving them some upgrades, and then also starting to look at next season. So retention is one of my top priorities through especially January, February, March. And what we often find is that a lot of our athletes are kind of in this mode where, if they've done cheer a really long time, this is kind of the time of the season that I tend to see them coast. They have their skills, they're hitting the routines. And instead of being excited for that next big challenge of, adding the upgrades into the routine, they sort of are taking it a little bit easier than normal. And so this has been a really good season for us to continue to push them. Instead of bringing in a choreographer to do our upgrades, which in the past is what we did, we would find that if I brought in a choreographer in the beginning of March or the middle of March, my kids would sort of coast from the time they were solidly hitting that routine until March. And then they would have to do this big, heavy, hard push from March until our end of season event. And so by doing our upgrades ourselves, and this is actually not even the topic of this episode, but by doing our upgrades ourselves, we've been able to add little things here and there that, maybe I'm doing an extended lib in this spot, or I'm doing a show and go over in this spot, or I'm changing a cradle to a quarter cradle. And so those added challenges are really continuing to keep our kids pushing throughout the season, where a lot of times we're just focused on perfect until that choreographer gets there to create those new challenges. So it's been really good for my gym to just kind of do it ourselves. We know what our kids are strong at. I know that on my level 3, I've got a couple of kids that I just cannot push them to put in one more tumbling pass. But I've got other kids that are far more consistent these days that maybe weren't in the routine at the beginning of choreography. And so it's easier for me as the coach to be able to make those upgrades than to bring somebody in who maybe doesn't know my team or knew them back in July and hasn't been able to see them progress practice by practice. Okay, so today we are going to talk about the retention roadmap, month-by-month strategies to keep your athletes coming back each season. First off, I feel like when we're in the fall, we almost don't need those same retention strategies. Kids are more excited. You probably just did showcase. They're still trying to consistently hit routines. Maybe you have kids who, they have a bunch of tumbling passes and stunting and they're in jumps and stuff like that. And so the routine is still really challenging because they're having to condition themselves still to that level, right? At the beginning of the season, so this season I coach mini level 1, senior level 3, and a junior level 1 prep team. And really, I guess it's not senior 3, it's U17 level 3. For those older kids, at the beginning of the season, I was like, man, this routine is really fast paced. Like, I think we're in good shape. I don't know that we're going to have to add very much. I don't even know where I would add much. And as the season has progressed and we've continued to clean it and my kids are in better shape and they're just cleaner with their stunting, we've been able to increase that pace. And I actually, at the last competition, I sat back and I'm like, we were out of range of first place by 0.15. And I kind of sat back and I was like, man, I do know a couple of places that I could probably, add a skill here or turn this straight up into a 360 up or something like that, where we could increase our level of difficulty and just overall kind of add more level appropriate skills, add more elite level skills, and increase the overall pace of the routine. Through the fall, I feel like, I don't have to do a whole heck of a lot for retention. My retention is recognizing publicly those kids who are achieving the goals of the team and themselves, and then really helping them build that bond and helping them build that confidence in that level. So if you're wondering as I go through why I'm starting in January, it's because I just don't feel like I have to do a whole heck of a lot in, October, November, December to really build that retention. I feel like the challenges start coming in January when we're pretty solidly hitting routines. So let's start with the month by month. In January every year, I host what we call Coffee and Conversation. Now, I'm probably going to change the name of that because it turns out I'm the only person that's drinking coffee after 7 o'clock at night. So maybe not the best name for it anymore. But basically, these are feedback sessions, and I run them with each individual team with the parents. The kids are not there for this. If you have siblings, you are advised, we prefer to not have siblings there, especially if they're on teams. So if your 6-year-old sister is available, we ask that it's just the parents. Helps keep us a little bit more focused. So in these sessions, I sit and I ask questions like, tell me what's gone well this season. If you could change one thing about the cheer program, what would it be? Have you seen any ways this season that we could have saved you money while maintaining the value of different things? Tell me about the different competitions we've attended. What did you like? What did you not like? And why? Do you feel like we placed the right coaches on this team? And so it gives me a lot of feedback. And if you're sitting there a little cringy, you're like, oh, I am not doing this with my teams, then I'm going to tell you, you're probably the perfect candidate to start doing it. Because if those kind of questions scare you to ask your customers, then you have a couple of things. You've got some culture shifts that need to happen. You've probably got some changes in the gym. Even if you think you're running everything totally perfect, and maybe you are, I'm going to tell you, you're probably not if you have customers who you would be afraid to hear those answers. It's all about growth, right? And I think it can be really affirming to hear parents confirm the things we kind of already know that need to happen, and maybe even bring to light some of the things that maybe way deep down we were thinking that's probably the case. So in the past, I have had, let's get to the coaching question. That's one that I'm always like, oh, this is, never my favorite question to ask, though I can kind of already guess how it's going to go on some teams. In the past, when I've asked, do you think we've placed the right coaches on the team? I get answers, it's either absolutely these coaches were awesome, or I get answers like, I just wish she was more firm, or I feel like she's really, really strict for, whatever level and division we're in. I would say that's my 10%, my 90% are, I wish they were harder. It's a good thing for me to hear those things for a couple reasons. One, it helps us educate the parents on what level of discipline and how firm are we going to be in novice versus prep versus elite. Because in my gym, those are kind of different worlds, right? In novice, everybody can try every position. Everybody can jump. Everybody can be an important part of dance, all of that stuff, because you're just learning the fundamentals and performing the fundamental skills. In prep, for me at my gym, you're kind of starting to figure out like, okay, this person's a back spot. This person is likely a base. This person's likely a flyer. This person is in jumps. And though that might change a little bit, I don't know on my junior prep team that I have really changed any positions this year. I'd be willing to do it if I needed to. I did swap out a non-tumbler and a tumbler. So someone whose technique wasn't quite clean enough after the first couple competitions to be tumbling, I swapped her with somebody else. That said, it's kind of the middle ground for me for prep. And then our elite teams, like if you're not hitting the skills, and we've got a process, and I've written blogs so that we're not, breaking hearts and surprising and shocking parents. But like if you're not hitting the skills, or let's say you're supposed to do a standing 3 handsprings and you're hitting standing 2 and you're just not pulling that third one, or you're supposed to pull your tuck and you're kind of bailing more consistently for, no obvious reason, like nobody was in your way, you're not near the edge of the floor, stuff like that, we're probably going to pull you, right? And like I said, I have a process so that kids don't get pulled out of nowhere where they're super shocked, and it prevents parents from being really upset, but it is a different level of discipline. At novice, we can play a little bit of games at the end of practice. At prep, we might do like conditioning games. By elite, even with my minis, we're just not doing a lot of games. We might be doing games where we're practicing how clean can we move in a prep. Can we cradle with this like ball between our legs, like this little foam ball, like stuff like that. It's just a little bit different than tag or something like that. Not that they don't love those, but they're so much more intentional at those more serious disciplined levels. So things like coffee and conversation help me to see, do the parents understand, like, did I do a good job educating them on what to expect? And did I place the right coaches on the team? Because if you get a coach like me on novice, actually, I'm probably more laid back on teams than I realized. And I figured that out with my minis this year. But, if you get a coach like me on novice, like I'm probably going to be a bit too demanding on a novice team. And I've coached for 25 years. I can alter that at this point. But a coach who's only coached a couple of years may not be able to alter the way that they naturally coach as easily. So if they're a very firm, disciplined coach, they may be a firm, disciplined coach on every team they coach, regardless of age or the various programs. Versus a coach who is fairly laid back may have a really hard time when the kids are kind of chit-chatting over in the corner. They may have a really hard time not letting them, okay, we're going to give them a couple minutes. They just worked really hard. And now I'm going to let them kind of get that social time before we move on to the next thing. And so it really helps me. If you're sitting back and you're like, the anxiety I would have by hosting these kind of feedback sessions, then I'm telling you, you absolutely have to, because you've got culture issues in the gym, right? The first question I ask in those, and I know I gave a couple of examples, but the first question I ask is what's gone well this season? And I intentionally ask that question because it's going to set the tone for me for the rest of the focus group. The whole time that the parents are giving this feedback and I'm asking the questions, I try really hard not to respond. And I tell them that at the beginning. I'm like, even if I hear something that I want to reply to, I'm going to kind of wait until the end because I want you guys to feel like you can continue talking and that my reply isn't going to shut anything down. I want you to be comfortable giving those opinions. Now, the last couple of minutes, I might go back to those things. I had tiny novice parents say, well, we'd like blingy bows. And so at the end of the session, I went back, the last couple of minutes and I said, okay, so I will hit on a couple of these. I love that you guys want the blingy bows. You actually are going to get more bling when you join prep. And then once you're at elite, that bow really sparkles. It's just kind of the nature of the program and you're paying more at the various levels for the bow. So that's how I kind of give that feedback and education. That said, sometimes I don't feel like it's necessary to give that kind of education in the moment. And I kind of wait until we have our All-Star 101 session later the next season. So it just sort of depends if we've got time, if I feel like the parents are going to be receptive in that moment. And then, how important is it? Like, I don't intend to change the type of bow that my novice kids are getting. And so it was a pretty easy answer for me. But then, on other questions, people are actually giving me feedback and I'm kind of sitting back thinking, okay, maybe that is something that I would be willing to change or I'd want to change. And so I don't commit to making any of those changes in that moment. I take all the notes. I mean, I like sit and type furiously, like typing class in 7th grade kind of typing. And then I later go pop that into ChatGPT. I tell it, please give me key takeaways and a summary. And then I sit down with the coach from the team and we just kind of go over, here was the feedback from the team, here are the takeaways. And if there are action items, I do that. So I like to do those at the end of January. For us, it's not quite the end of the season. It's not quite the middle of the season. It's, I don't know, like 3/4 of the way through, right? Because our season begins in May. So it's just long enough that like they have opinions on the coaching, they have opinions on practices. They have several, I wouldn't say several, but they've probably got 2 or 3 competitions already in by that point. And then it opens the door for those competitions that we're doing in February and March and April that they know, hey, I want your feedback because I can make decisions before I put out the schedule for next year. That's how I structure those. When we then go, and this is what I will say for February, I do still an in-person all-star tryout meeting. It's not the only way to get the info by any means. Our packet typically comes out February 15th. This year, I think the 15th was a Friday or Saturday, so we did push it and did it the Wednesday prior. But about 2 weeks later, I do an in-person tryout meeting and I get pretty good attendance. And here's why. That tryout meeting is, I mean, we're kind of just going over the same stuff that's already in the packet. If you've been with me 3 or 4 years, like there's probably no surprises during that portion of the meeting. However, at the end of the meeting, I go to these parents, and I have my PowerPoint slide and it says, based on your suggestions, ... And so I tell these parents, and I purposely say it for the newbies in the room. I say, if you weren't here last season, this next section is not necessarily for you. That said, you are welcome to stay, or you're not going to hurt our feelings if you want to head out at this time, but you are welcome to stay and hear the suggestions that we are implementing for next season. At that moment, like nobody gets up and walks out. And so it's kind of a great thing because these parents who are new are hearing the positive things that you are making changes for the upcoming season. They don't want to be like that one person that gets up and walks out of the room. And so they tend to stay. But then I go into back in January, we did our coffee and conversation so that I could get your feedback. Based on your feedback, we have decided to implement these 3 changes for next season. Now, guys, some years, these are changes we were already going to make, but the parents reaffirmed that these were the right changes for us to make. Other years, they were things that we heard about them in January. They didn't necessarily affect the packet. For example, maybe we decided that instead of doing leveled tumbling, we were going to move to team tumbling. Didn't really impact it because you're still getting your tumbling class with the elite teams. It just kind of impacts the schedule, which you don't get until you make a team anyway. So things like that like we have a little bit of extra time to make those decisions, right? And even like the specifics for how will you implement it, I don't always have the details for that at that tryout meeting, but I'm able to say we know we are going to do this. Other seasons, some of the changes, one year when the scrunchies were really big a few years back, we did scrunchies, and at the parent meetings, a couple of people said, we kind of missed the bows. I was going to change back to bows anyway, but I was able to use that as one of mine. Based on your feedback, you missed the bows. We missed the bows too. Next season, we're going back to bows. And so some of these are like small, silly things, but I get a lot of parents who attend that meeting because they want to hear what were the changes that you were given that you've decided to implement for next season. February is that all-star tryout meeting. Also, we're doing our benchmark assessments. And so this is a link we put out. It's kind of a Calendly link with scheduling where each coach has their own schedule on there and you can request a 15-minute meeting with the coach. We basically give like a little bit of a report card that's like below level, at level, above level, or like exceeding level. We go through running tumbling difficulty, running tumbling execution, standing tumbling difficulty, standing tumbling execution, jumps, showmanship, dance, stunting, flying, stuff like that for those who do fly. And then on the back, it says top 3 areas you've grown since tryouts of 2024, which of course this is 2025. So that's why it says that. And then top 3 areas we would like to see growth in the next 90 days. And then a section that says how we're going to get there. I fill out everything except the how we're going to get there. I sit down with the athlete and their parent, even if they are a senior level athlete. I do not do this without the parent, because the true retention comes from having the parent involved in this and really being able to say, like, I need you to hear how she's grown this season. Maybe she didn't get a new tumbling skill, but her back handspring is so much more solid. She can now rebound out of the handspring, right? Maybe she didn't get a new handspring, but her feet are together. Maybe she didn't get a handspring, but her body control, she can lift those hips. And there's a moment, the split second, when her hands and feet are both off the ground, which shows me that she can, block off those shoulders. It gives a bit of an education to the parents that sometimes the kids already have. And then it also, I would say, in the past, parents might look at something and say, well, she started the season with a handspring and she doesn't have a tuck, so she didn't grow it all this season. And it gives me the chance to say, well, actually, she can now do her back walkover back handspring. She can do a Valdez back handspring. She can do a round off 2 back handsprings. She can do front walkover through to round off handspring. She can do a handspring step out. But realistically, most parents, a kid will get a handspring. They think the next skill is a tuck. They'll get a tuck. They think the next skill is a layout. And so this is our chance to really educate parents also on wow, between a handspring and a tuck, there's 7 skills that we require. Right? From the time you can do your handspring, I think it's 7 to 10 skills before you really would start focusing on that tuck only. And so those benchmark assessments are helpful because they give parents a progress update. And then that bottom section is how are we going to get there? And I leave it blank because I want to work it out with the athlete themselves. I will basically say to the parent, okay, so her goals for next year, I want her to work on jumps. She's got good jumps. I think she could have great jumps. So what can we do? And I kind of look at the athlete in this moment and I say, what can we do to improve your jumps in the next 90 days? And this is also good education for the parents because they can see that athlete actually knows what they should be doing, right? The athlete knows because we've told them before. It's really great in that sense because the parents can see my kids kind of know what they should be doing right now. And now I just have to actually do it. Then in March, we go through, and for the last couple of months, we've been doing an athlete risk assessment. This is basically a spreadsheet with every athlete in our program, and it has been for the last January, February, March. They've been either green, yes, we're great. We'd be shocked if they're not coming back next season. They're yellow. She's really into softball right now. I don't know if she'll come back next season. Or, this wasn't her favorite season. She really didn't get to do as much in the routine, or she just didn't seem like she enjoyed it as much. Maybe she's a little burned out. Or red, hey, we're pretty sure she's not coming back next season for one reason or another. This athlete risk assessment is something we've tracked in January, February, March. And so we can go to those athletes that the coaches have put in either yellow or red. We can go to them and their parents and kind of say, hey, so where are we at for next season? What are you thinking at this point? Do you think you'll come back? Do you have other plans for next season? So a lot of times we hear people say, well, she's going into high school and, she's going to do high school cheer and I'm just not really sure if she'll be able to do both. And so that's maybe they're yellow because of that. And that's my opportunity to sit down with them and say, okay, well, our senior teams, our junior and senior, which she would likely be on one of those, practice on Sundays. They only have one other night a week. It's at 7 p.m. or later. My daughter did high school cheer, and here's what I can tell you. And at least for our school, I realize there's some really great high schools out there. For our small town high school, it's super educational because I had this conversation with a parent last week who is on one of my teams. So I already approached that. I thought they were probably in the yellow for potentially not returning. I heard that they wanted to focus on high school cheer. And I kind of said, I know that she wants to cheer in college and she's going to be a freshman. And so that's a little ways away and she might change her mind. But I can tell you what she is going to learn in high school cheer is not going to be sufficient enough to cheer at a D1 college. She has to stay an all-star if she wants to maintain those skills and continue advancing in skills in order to make a team at a D1 university. And so it was pretty educational for the parent who had not experienced high school cheer before to kind of see, okay, maybe this isn't quite what I thought it was going to be. They're getting the sideline experience, but they're missing out on the tumbling, the upper level stunting, even the jumps and stuff like that you really need to have, especially if you want to go to a university that's competitive. So those are the majority of the things we're doing January, February, March. Between that coffee and conversation, the benchmark assessments, the tryout meeting, the athlete risk assessment, we're also doing some stuff with retention campaigns and all-star marketing. Like, I am marketing to my current athletes. A lot of gyms do an early bird special. I know Dan just talked about that on the CheerBiz podcast. And here's my advice. I think it's valuable if there are a lot of other gyms around, or even a couple other gyms that are potentially vying for the same athletes. At this time, I'm kind of the only gym within a 30-minute radius. It's not that I'm getting people because they don't have other options, because they totally do. But for me, most of my people have this mentality that they want our teams to be as successful as possible. And I've educated them that I need you to register early so we can start kind of looking, how many athletes do we have? We don't want to be scrambling for coaches at the last minute. We want to have plenty of time to say, we've got 120 athletes. I foresee, 8 teams or 9 teams. And based off of that, that means that we need to create these slots within our schedule. And we certainly don't want to wait until tryouts, and give ourselves only 48 hours, because that's when mistakes happen, right? We want to do that and kind of prepare in advance. So though we're not pre-placing, we're definitely creating blocks in our schedule for the number of teams based off of the number of athletes that are registered. So I'm pretty honest with our parents about that. And so far, at least, I am a couple years behind Dan and Shelly. This will be season 14 for us. But so far, I haven't had to do a VIP registration or early bird registration. I haven't really had to give any incentives, because our parents are really great so far about just kind of understanding that this is how we build teams to the best of our ability. And so please register early. I'm not beyond incentives if we get to the point where I find that people are procrastinating. I'll also tell you something that's a little bit unique about my program versus others. We really don't have an intense contract. In fact, it's a pretty short contract. I wouldn't even call it a contract. I've read the parent handbook and I understand. I understand fees are due. I understand I can't participate if my fees are not paid. And this applies to all fees. I understand that if my fees are not paid by 8 p.m. on the due date, the card on file will be charged. Honestly, it's pretty easy for parents to do that re-registration for us each season. In fact, we're kind of at a point where Lexi will say, hey, I will actually sit here. I'll type it all out for you and get her re-registered. I just need you to sign off on this box here. So do you want me to get her re-registered? Great. I'll do that. Here you go. And so that's kind of where we're at. And we have 150 or so athletes. And so we don't do that with everybody, but those stragglers that tend to procrastinate or be extra busy or would otherwise not sign up until it's too late, we help them out a little bit and baby them just a bit. So hopefully you guys found this valuable. We are going to be doing our tryout meeting next week. And so I will give you guys, after that meeting, I'll kind of give you some tips in the next couple of months here on what we decided to change based on that parent feedback for next season. All right, you guys. Well, thanks so much for joining me this week on this episode of Fireside Chat with the Johnston. If you guys are not in our Facebook groups, make sure you head over to Facebook. If you're a gym owner, join Cheer Gym Owners on Facebook. If you are a coach or an owner who really loves the coaching side of things, also head over and join All-Star Cheer Coaches and Owners. If you're an owner, join both though, because you're going to find stuff in the owners group that you will not otherwise see in the coaches group. And lastly, if you guys are looking for an amazing summer conference, head over to ngconferences.com. Check out our Dallas event. This is going to be the #1 biggest conference in All-Star Cheer in 2025. We have hands-on spotting training, CPR, first aid, and AED certifications. There are a ton of things like score sheet education, and we've got some amazing instructors I'm not allowed to announce just yet, but it's going to be a really, really great conference. Best one yet. All right. Okay, guys. So we look forward to seeing you this summer in Dallas. And with that, I will catch you on the next episode.